This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is November 8th, 2020, and I'm producer Pat. We've got 3 interesting segments for you today. Darren is going to investigate whether Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. Adam looks at headlines stating that archeologists have discovered a 2,000-year-old carving of a cat in Peru. But first, Cristina tells us about how COVID-19 testing is done in Canada and answers a listener's question about nasal swabs. I hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
Recently, the Public Health Agency of Canada, aka PHAC, although some people do call them PHAC, reached out to us offering an interview with an expert from Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory, NML, about COVID-19. Now, the fact that we're on their radar is simply awesome, and we appreciate them reaching out. As many of you who listen regularly know, because of COVID-19, we haven't been able to do a proper show with the crew in Ottawa. We pre-tape solo segments when possible, so interviews are a little more challenging, and we would definitely want to do an interview with a NML expert justice. But we still wanted to support any messaging that PHAC is looking to get out about COVID and public safety. So here we go. Now, PHAC's media relations person states in their email, the NML provides unique scientific and emergency response leadership to help guide Canada's response to COVID-19. Since the beginning of the pandemic, NML scientists' research and findings have played a key role in helping officials make informed decisions, preventing the spread of COVID-19, and saving lives. Here in the Great White North, the good people at NML work closely with public health labs nationwide to speed up testing, conduct validation, and maintain quality control so we can ensure reliable results, as well as keep an eye on evolving info and technologies around testing, of course. Now, NML's areas of expertise include testing, serology and point-of-care testing, support laboratory testing, and confirming accuracy of testing devices, modeling, developing models to estimate how many cases may occur and understand what might happen in certain scenarios and its impact on people and communities, surveillance, wastewater surveillance initiatives to collect and test sewage samples in select settings for the virus that causes COVID-19, and research, develop a vaccine and studies on how infectious it is and how it spreads. Now, if you want more info, I recommend you check out Public Health's Coronavirus Disease COVID-19 Awareness Resources. I link to it in our show notes. I also link to a great 3-minute or so animated video titled How the National Microbiology Laboratory Tests for COVID-19, which is my focus today. And I'm going to break it down for your ears right now. Okay, so how do we test for COVID-19 here in Canada? Not surprising, diagnostic testing is a key element in how we find cases and prevent the spread of the coronavirus that causes the disease. Public Health Agency scientists work with provincial public health lab partners to explore and validate 3 ways of testing for COVID-19: molecular PCR testing, point-of-care testing, and serology testing. Now, molecular PCR testing is used to detect cases of COVID-19 in people infected with the virus. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. Swabs are used to collect samples from the nasal cavity or throat, then placed in a tube containing a liquid material to preserve the sample. Then it's sent off to a lab. Once at the lab, test kits that include reagents that strip away all the materials except the genetic material are used for each sample. So I wanted to make sure I understood reagent. Reagent is a substance or compound added to a system to cause a chemical reaction or added to test if a reaction occurs. Now, if COVID-19 genetic material is present in the sample, a machine will amplify it until it can be detected. It can process many samples at one time and detect the virus even in small amounts. PHAC states that once the sample is received, results are ready in 1 to 3 days. Next is point-of-care testing, which involves a rapid test done on the spot where you're being cared for, essentially, like a doctor's office or hospital. Now, during molecular point-of-care tests, swabs are taken from the nose or throat, put into fluid, again, and placed in a testing device on site that can detect the genetic material of the coronavirus. The advantages of molecular point-of-care testing is that it can provide results quickly, in like 30 to 60 minutes. It also doesn't require a laboratory professional to perform it, and this helps serve remote communities since you can test results on the spot. Now, a disadvantage is that only a limited number of tests can be performed in a single device at any time. The video cited 1 to 16. Finally, there is serology testing, where blood is drawn from your arm and tested on a serology testing machine. The blood test helps detect antibodies produced by the immune system in order to fight infections created by the virus. The test can detect 2 types of antibodies, one indicating a current infection and another that indicates a past infection. A serology test is important as it, 1, helps monitor how many infections have occurred in various communities, and 2, helps us understand how the immune system reacts to COVID-19 after infection. These results also take 1 to 3 days once received at the lab. As FAC states, the challenge is that early detection of infections can be difficult, as antibodies can take several days to develop. So there you have a synopsis of how the National Microbiology Laboratory tests for COVID-19. However, before I let you go, I wanted to quickly address a question sent in from checker Sheila in Vancouver, Washington. Here's an excerpt. I'm a first-year teacher trying to navigate remote learning, so I'm punting these questions to you in an effort to save time and so I can have something to look forward to listening to. Frequently seen from COVID doubters on Facebook, if COVID-19 is spread through a tiny piece of saliva from 10 feet away, why do you need to stick a Q-tip up your brain for a COVID test? Love you guys, Sheila. Well, Sheila, I can speak for the whole crew when I say we love you too. It is such a privilege to have so many great listeners. We don't take it for granted, so thank you so much for writing in. Now, Sheila's right. A quick Goog, and I found a USA Today article citing a Facebook user's post, quote, "Modern science can take a swab from the inside of your cheek and do a complete DNA mapping." All in caps, by the way. If this COVID-19 is so contagious that tiny microscopic particles of saliva in your mouth could spread out in excess of 6 feet and you need to wear a mask to stop the spread, why not swab the inside of your highly contagious mouth? Again in caps. Now, this person also speculated that instead of retrieving samples, nasal COVID-19 tests may actually be, quote unquote, implanting something. But let's stick with rational thought and reason, shall we? And the simple answer is that diagnostic tests for COVID-19 must be performed on the respiratory tract. As USA Today states, of the 5 acceptable specimens for initial testing listed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 4 are nasal or nasopharyngeal specimens, which test the nose and throat respectively. So, the bigger the surface area swabbed, the more likely the swab collects any virus that may be lurking in your nose and throat. And in order to get a good sample, nasal swabs have to go pretty far back to collect cells and fluids from the base of your nose and back of your throat. In fact, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health says that nasal sampling is actually, quote, less invasive and results in less patient discomfort than alternative sampling sites. So there you have it, checkers. Until next time, stay safe, stay classy, and not smartassy.
You may have heard the news and seen the humorous image. Archaeologists discovered a 2,000-year-old cat figure carved in Peru's Nazca Lines site.
I did. It's huge.
It's massive. So very cool was my first thought. That's not a cat, is it? Was my second. The ears do look like a cat, but I don't think it was what we know of as a cat. Were there really cats in South America 2,000 years ago before European settlers arrived in the New World? Well, I haven't been this confused about animal domestication in the Americas since I watched the movie Beverly Hills Chihuahua, but more on that later.
Let's hope not much more.
The image, which is 121 feet long, is being widely described as a cat. A lot of the commentary is like, oh, so much the feel's this, it's a cat, and people really think of it as their cats that they know. It was uncovered recently as the area had suffered from natural erosion. After cleaning and conservation work, a series of well-defined lines between 11 and 16 inches thick were uncovered. These date back to about 100 to 200 BCE, so roughly 2100 to 2200 years ago.
Wild.
Peru's Ministry of Culture claimed that representations of felines of this type are frequently seen in iconography, ceramics, and textiles of the Paracas. The Paracas culture being a society which lived in the area roughly between 800 BCE and 100 BCE. Okay, so we're saying felines, but we don't really mean cats like domestic cats, do we? So, my understanding before digging into this issue was that cats originated in the Fertile Crescent along with us humans. Digging in on Wikipedia says this is pretty much true. The earliest signs of feline domestication were around 9,500 to 9,200 years ago, so around 7,500 BCE at the earliest. The idea is that early human settlements had rodents which attracted cats, which then became domesticated in the sense that they tolerated to be around humans in exchange for food, which cat lovers know is more or less the relationship cats and humans have today. Agriculture meant rodents, which meant cats, so as agriculture spread throughout the world, so did domestic cats. Now, this does not account for domestic cats in South America. Humans crossed into the Americas over the Beringian land bridge, a now flooded stretch of land which connects Russia and Alaska between 12,000 and 15,000 years ago.
So you said Beringian. Is that different than the Bering Strait?
So the Bering Strait is what we call it now because it's flooded. So because of the water.
Uh-huh.
So that's not that long ago, but it's still sometime prior to cat domestication. So those domestic cats could not have crossed over that land.
And cats don't like water, so...
No, they don't. They really don't. You ever try to give a cat a bath? The simple fact is that domestic cats followed humans to the Americas only when European settlers arrived by ship, which was hundreds, not thousands of years ago. While the cats in An American Tale were wrong to assume that there are no cats in America, that statement would have been true until a few hundred years ago. This presents a problem for the 2,000-plus-year-old cat image in Peru. So what is it? Well, when we say cat, what are we really saying? So this usually means house cat, but cat can colloquially refer to anything in the family Felidae, which includes leopards, tigers, lions, bobcats, ocelots, lynxes, cheetahs, cougars, jaguars, and this adorable creature called the Pallas cat. And this also includes the domestic cat and its close relative, the African wildcat.
Oh.
Okay, so what the hell is this giant 2,000-year-old cat sketch really supposed to be? There are actually quite a few cat species which were in the Americas prior to European settlers arriving a bit over 500 years ago. Some of them, like cougars and jaguar, didn't really fit the image of a cat that we think of. But the Nazca Line cat is a caricature which is vague enough that it could fit any of these things. Still, a lot of smaller cat species did exist which are somewhat similar looking to modern domestic cats, and that may very well be what's being depicted here. Pampas cats are one example of this, and they are native to Peru. Ocelots could also fit the bill. They're a little skinnier or whatever, but it's just kind of a drawing. Regardless of what wild cat species this image actually depicts, it's almost certainly not a domesticated animal. While cats portrayed in something like Egyptian art were likely inspired by something comparable to today's house cats, those portrayed by the Paracas and other cultures in the Americas prior to European settlement would have been wild cats. These were not pets. These were not someone's beloved cat. So great. That settles cats. What about dogs? Now, a while back, I was watching the Beverly Hills Chihuahua films because my daughter wanted to watch a dog movie, and we had not heard of Space Buddies yet. In the first film, by far the best of the trilogy, the main characters, who are Chihuahuas, find their way to an Aztec temple and run into a Chihuahua named Montezuma, who brings them to the Mexican state of Chihuahua, where these dogs supposedly come from. So again, I was very confused here. Didn't dogs just come to America with European settlers, I thought? Well, dogs aren't cats, and dog domestication occurred much earlier in human history. This would have been between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago. Contrast that with the much more recent 9,500 years ago for cat domestication. So, cat domestication was tied to agriculture, but dog domestication occurred prior to that. That range is still disputed, but the oldest undisputed domestic dog remains are around 14,200 years old. The oldest disputed ones are about 36,000 years old. So there's the key. Cat domestication occurred after humans traveled to North America, but dogs did enter the Americas over 10,000 years ago. North American dog remains are similar to those found in northeastern Siberia. So, where'd the Chihuahua come from? Well, there are multiple theories. It seems that the breed originated in Mexico and is likely related to the Chichi. Records of the Chichi only go as far back as the 9th century, so while this certainly predates European settlement, it's not as old as, say, the big 121-foot cat in the hillside. So there are references to Chihuahuas in early accounts of European settlers. Hernan Cortez wrote that Aztecs raised and sold little dogs as food. So these are little dogs, similar to a Chihuahua, not something like a wolf or something like that. There are colonial records of small, nearly hairless dogs. Genetic studies have shown that little pre-European mitochondrial DNA exists in modern Chihuahuas due to mixing with European dogs. So what those Chihuahuas might have looked like may be quite different from what we know them as today. So that massive 2,000 plus year old cat drawing on a hillside, not really what we'd think of as a cat, but likely a type of felidae, which we colloquially refer to as cats. Possibly something fairly small that more or less physically resembles a house cat, but was not domesticated, as domesticated cats were introduced to the continent by European settlers much later. Dogs, on the other hand, were domesticated much earlier, and the ludicrous talking dog movie Beverly Hills Chihuahua did prompt me to learn that dogs, much like humans, came to the Americas prior to that area being cut off from the rest of the world when the land bridge Beringia was covered by the Bering Sea around 11,000 years ago. As such, domesticated dogs absolutely existed in North and South America prior to the arrival of Europeans, including in the Mexican state of Chihuahua, after which the dog breed and Hollywood film take their name.
Are you saying it's a dog, not a cat, though?
No.
Why not?
Why not a dog?
I just
The
looked at
tail's
it.
too long.
Well, okay, I just looked at it. Anyone happens to look this up. The head could be dog or cat-like. It looks a bit more like a cat.
Yeah.
The back of it could be a dinosaur, quite frankly. Not to criticize a huge drawing of an
Yeah.
animal on a hill,
Yeah.
but it's not that clear what it is.
Yeah, so some dogs have floppy ears. Obviously, this image has triangle ears like a cat. Chihuahuas also have smaller ears like that. So you're right, that would fit. I think the muzzle of a dog is generally sticks out a bit more, even if a Chihuahua is further back, but it's not like a Chihuahua. I think some people do mistake like pugs and Chihuahuas for cats sometimes when they see them quick, but there's differences.
Maybe things looked a little different 2,000 years ago.
I feel like if you show this picture, we're not going to call it a cat or a dog, but if you show this picture to like almost anyone, they're not going to say dog. They're going to say cat.
Well, right. And it also now says cat-like in every headline.
Does it?
Pretty much.
Well, that's changed since like
Well,
yesterday.
okay. Cat-like thing, cat-like. Maybe,
Sure.
maybe I Googled it and that's why I got that.
Yeah.
Okay, to be fair. But I think now imagine you showed them a photo and said like, look, a dog-like thing was found in the Peru. People are like, yeah, I guess it's dog-like.
Yeah, if you prime someone for dog, maybe.
Well, there's a lot of types of dogs too.
For sure. I don't know, Darren. I'm not gonna tackle the was it really a dog conspiracy theory.
Take a bold stance, Adam. Tell you what, you stay with cat. I'll advocate dogs. It'll be like cats and dogs fighting it out over thousands of years.
I also don't know like what kind of domestic dogs they may have had in Peru at the time, so I'm not prepared to really go with that statement either.
Do you like dogs?
Like it's still pretty far from Mexico, right?
True. It's not correct. Peru is not that close to Mexico. I mean, it's closer than parts of Asia.
Sure.
Well, actually, that's
Siberia.
Well, it
the
is
Fertile
closer than parts of. Well, it is closer than parts of Asia, but it's not closer than other parts of Asia. Perhaps.
Yeah, potentially. If
Depending
you're
on you.
traveling as the bird flies, which dogs don't do.
That's true.
Not yet, but we'll work on that.
Well, I appreciate your analysis nonetheless. The other day on Facebook, I shared a joke image that has a mother and a child looking like they're in the 1950s with the mother cooking. The child says, "Grandma said, in her day, she did 3 times the work you do today." To which the mother responds, "In Grandma's day, they had cocaine in the sodas." That's amusing, but I happily live in a skeptical community, so frenemy of the show, Stuart Robbins, posted, "Except, according to Professor Buzzkill, the amount of cocaine in soda was practically homeopathic." Well, now, we've had Professor Buzzkill on, and he does seem to know his stuff, but I was curious. But then another Facebook friend, Alexander, commented on Stewart's post saying, "It looks like this was the case starting in the early 1900s, but may not be true for the late 1800s, linking a Snopes article. Mm-hmm. Well, now, a possible battle among the skeptics? Let's investigate. Oh, and a shout out to Elizabeth who posted, "Who needs cocaine when you have Adderall?" So my 2 main sources are the Snopes piece and Professor Buzzkill's article from episode 105, both at trcpodcast.com.
Great website.
Snopes' piece was published in May 1999, before Y2K wiped out the internet. Nice. And we had to start over after Judgment Day.
The old one was better.
Mm-hmm. And Professor Buzzkill's was published in May 2016, so only 17 years later. But I'm going to blend and quote from both. Our Buzzkill friend tells us that John Pemberton, who was a Georgia pharmacist, had something of a morphine addiction due to Civil War wounds, as was the case back then, and he wanted to develop some sort of stimulant to help him get off morphine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like, I'm thinking of Coca-Cola. Civil War? What happened? Time, right? Wow. In 1885, Coca-Cola got its name from the extract of coca leaves and cola nuts. That's cola nuts with a K. Mm-hmm. What could be better than cocaine? And thus, Coca-Cola was created in the 1880s. I kid. Not quite. Let's explore the origins in more detail. It wasn't just Pemberton that led the Coca-Cola innovation. From the company website, quote, thinking that the two C's would look well in advertising, Dr. Pemberton's partner and bookkeeper, Frank M. Robinson, suggested the name and penned the now famous trademark Coca-Cola in his unique script. Oh. The first newspaper ad for Coca-Cola soon appeared in the Atlanta Journal, inviting thirsty citizens to try the new and popular soda fountain drink. Hand-painted oilcloth signs reading Coca-Cola appeared on store awnings, with the suggestion, drink, added to inform passerby that the new beverage was for soda fountain refreshment. During the first year, sales averaged a modest 9 drinks per day. Uh-huh. Yeah, I know. Dr. Pemberton never realized the potential of the beverage he created. He gradually sold portions of his business to various partners and, just prior to his death in 1888, sold his remaining interest in Coca-Cola to Asa G. Candler, an Atlantan with great business acumen. Mr. Candler proceeded to buy additional rights and acquire complete control. I mean, if he died in 1888, he wasn't going to really see the rise of Coca-Cola, but maybe his estate or his family would have gotten more benefits if he didn't sell it. Mm-hmm. For some insight about how cocaine was seen at the time, I'm going to quote Snopes, quoting Frederick Allen from his book, Secret Formula. Quote, the first stirrings of a national debate had begun over the negative aspects of cocaine, and manufacturers were growing defensive over charges that use of their products might lead to cocainism or the cocaine habit. The full-throated fury against cocaine was still a few years off, and Candler and Robinson were anxious to continue promoting the supposed benefits of the coca leaf, but there was no reason to risk putting more than a tiny bit of coca extract in their syrup. They cut the amount to a mere trace. But why not remove it entirely? Again, Snopes quotes Frederick Allen. But neither could Candler take the simple step of eliminating the fluid extract from coca leaves from the formula. Candler believed that his product's name had to be descriptive, and that he must have at least some byproduct of the coca leaf in the syrup, along with some cola with a K, to protect his right to the name Coca-Cola. Protecting the name was critical. Candler had no patent on the syrup itself. Anyone could make an imitation, but no one could put the label Coca-Cola on an imitation so long as Candler owned the name. The name was a thing of real value, and the registered trademark was its only safeguard. Coca leaves had to stay in the syrup. Branding. Yeah, power of marketing. Now we're going to quote Professor Buzzkill. The company needed to keep using coca extract, but in a cocaine-free way. They more or less accomplished this by using spent coca leaves, which had the cocaine removed before they were put in the drink. Essentially, the process by which this was accomplished only left a residue of the coca plant extract in the Coca-Cola recipe, but enough for the company to continue to claim that Coke's magic formula came partly from the coca plant itself. Alas, this process wasn't perfected, and they weren't able to get rid of all the cocaine until 1929. So now you're thinking, okay, that's fine, but how much Coke was in Coke?
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult to say, but Professor Buzzkill says that between when it was invented in the 1880s and 1903, there was as little as 1 part per 200,000 in Coca-Cola syrup. Between 1903 and 1929, when all traces were removed, it went down to 1 part per 50 million. Now,
that syrup is the concentrated part. Correct.
That's exactly. I'm still quoting here. Now, add to both of those almost infinitesimally minuscule amounts the fact that the standard ratio of carbonated water to syrup in the finished drink was 5-1. Yeah. And it says you need an electron microscope to see a number that small. End quote. Now, quoting Snopes here, in an entire year's supply of 25-odd million gallons of Coca-Cola syrup, there might be 6/100ths of an ounce of cocaine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you're curious, 6/100ths of an ounce is about 1.7 grams. Depending on your country, that will cost you around $150 to buy for cocaine. Sure. Certainly enough for a brief party, but you would have died from the 25 million gallons or close to 90 million liters of Coca-Cola that you drank first.
Yeah. It's so diluted, it would be all flushed out. Like, it doesn't.
Well, you would be dead. I just got to get my high on 90 million liters of Coke later.
It's like sniffing a bunch of dollar bills to try to like get cocaine.
That's funny. What is the ratio of dollar bill Coke versus Coca-Cola Coke from like 1890, and which one currently has more?
Yeah.
All that to say is that while there was a fractional amount of cocaine in Coca-Cola, it's probably the caffeine that it became known for. They kind of switched one for the other to have the same stimulant belief effect. You know, this is the time of tonics and whatnot, right? Yeah. That is not the case. There's cocaine at all in any sort of Coca-Cola now, and it hasn't been that way for, well, you can almost say forever if you're looking at actual amounts, but it's 70 years.
So prior to them basically only having that trace amount, there was like legitimately cocaine and enough to actually intoxicate in the 1880s? Or was there never a significant amount?
Yeah, to get to the exact point of the question which started this off, and just to reiterate, Professor Buzzkill said that between when it was invented in the 1880s and 1903, there was as little as 1 part per 200,000 in the syrup.
Okay, so even then it was what we would consider trace.
Right. So then if we think of the syrup and there is 5 times the carbonated water, that would mean 1 part per million.
Okay.
So yeah, 1895, 1 part per million cocaine in your drink. Well, that's nothing.
Yeah. You're not putting it in your nose, you're washing it down with a bunch of liquid. It's probably not doing anything.
Well, even if you put it in your nose, it's not going to do anything. It's still 1 part per million.
The bubbles, they fizz. You
Yeah,
ever
exactly.
laugh while you're drinking Coke? You know,
That's how I get my cocaine out of.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.